We are obsessed with the algorithm. As creators, marketers, or just people trying to be heard, we treat the algorithm like a digital god. We try to pray to it with hashtags, sacrifice our sanity for retention charts, and analyze metadata like it's scripture. But here's the truth. There is no algorithm. Well, not really. The code isn't optimized for robots. It's optimized for humans. The algorithm is just a mirror reflecting human psychology back at us. If you want to make good content that sticks, converts, and matters, you don't need to study the code. You need to study the brain. Today we're breaking down the 4 psychological pillars that explain why we click, why we watch, and why we share. Let's start with the click. Why did you click on this video? Was it the title? The thumbnail? Sure, but psychologically, it was something called the information gap theory. This theory was proposed by George Lowenstein in the early 90s. Sorry if I messed up your name. This theory states that when we feel a gap between what we know and what we want to know, it produces a feeling of emotional deprivation. It's essentially a mental itch that we physically need to scratch. Bad content creates a gap that is too wide, that's confusion, or a gap that is too narrow, that's boredom. Good content hits the Goldilocks zone. For example, if I title a video, My Morning Routine, there is no gap. You know what a morning routine is: coffee, shower, journal, boring. But if I add a title to it, The Morning Routine That Doubled My Income, suddenly there's a gap. You know what a routine is, but you don't know the specific variable that caused the financial change. However, there is a trap here. If you create a gap and don't fill it immediately, you get clickbait. Good content opens a loop, the curiosity gap, and then spends the rest of the video satisfyingly closing it. So you've got the click. Now how do you keep them? Why do we doom scroll for hours but struggle to read a 2-page document? It comes down to the dopamine prediction error. We used to think that dopamine was just the pleasure chemical, but it's actually the anticipation chemical. Our brains are prediction machines. When we watch a video, we are constantly predicting what happens next. If your content is perfectly predictable, the brain releases no dopamine. We get bored. We swipe. If your content is pure chaos, the brain gets stressed. We swipe. The good content sweet spot is novelty. You want to break the pattern. This is why quick cuts, B-roll changes, or changing your tone of voice works. You're resetting the viewer's prediction model. Every time you introduce a new visual, a new fact, or a joke, you're giving the brain a tiny reward for paying attention. You are saying, you couldn't predict that, could you? Well, here's a little dopamine treat. But be careful, if you rely only on fast cuts, you exhaust the viewer. The best retention comes from narrative tension, making us predict the end of the story, but delaying the gratification of getting there. Okay, we have attention and retention, but what makes a viewer care? What makes them subscribe or buy your product? That requires identity and social currency. Jonah Berger, the author of Contagious, talks about social currency. We share things that make us look good. When you share a video that is smart, you feel smart. When you share a video that is funny, you are the funny friend. Good content acts as a mirror for the audience's identity. It says, I see you. This is why relatable content explodes. When a creator admits to a flaw, procrastination, anxiety, failure, it creates a parasocial bond. This is what's called the pitfall effect. Psychology tells us that highly competent people become more likable when they make a blunder. If your content is too polished, too corporate, or too perfect, we don't trust it. We can't connect with the perfection. The psychology of good content is often the psychology of vulnerability. If you want a community, not just an audience, you have to show the cracks in the armor. You have to give them something that validates their identity. Finally, how do you make sure they remember you after they close the app? Enter Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman and the peak end rule. Sorry if I messed up your name again. Humans don't remember experiences based on the average of how they felt. We remember 2 things: the climax or the peak and how it ended. You can have a mediocre 10-minute video, but if you have one incredible insight in the middle and a satisfying emotional conclusion, the viewer will remember the video as great. On the contrary, if you have a great video that simply trails off or ends with a desperate plea for likes, you ruin the end. And the whole memory is tainted. This is why the standard "please subscribe" outro is dying. It's a low-value ending. Instead, structure your content to have a high-value payoff at the end. Deliver on the promise of the title right at the finish line. Leave them on a high. So stop trying to hack the code. Stop chasing the algorithm. Use the information gap to get them in. Use prediction error to keep them watching. Use identity and vulnerability to make them care, and use the peak end rule to make them remember. Because at the end of the day, the algorithm is just us. And if you understand people, you'll never have to worry about the machine. Thanks for watching.